All right. Well, good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock straight up, and we have the attendees coming into the Zoom meeting. So let me offer all of you a welcome to our monthly virtual membership meeting. I'm Jeff Becker. I'm your CASH chair and also the executive director of facilities and operations at the Office of the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving and good time with family, and that you and your teams are happy and healthy most of all right now. We've got a great meeting today. We've got our state agents with us again and some good updates from the CASH legislative advocates team. So let me offer a special welcome to our first-time attendees. And if you are a first-time attendee, feel free to drop your name into the chat box. Love to say hello to you and find out who we have joining us for the first time. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping, just a reminder to folks that as you come into the meeting, you are muted, but we do want to hear your questions and comments. So feel free also to drop those into the chat and make sure that you are messaging everyone in the meeting so that we can all see the question. And we'll have a great and smooth time together this morning. And then lastly, just a reminder, please refrain from any marketing in the chat box. We want to keep that communication channel clear to answer any questions directed to our folks that took the time to present with us this morning. So if you can move to the next slide, please. We've got a workshop coming up, a web shop online. And as a guy that came out of the finance side of the house, this one, I love this one. It's on preparing for audits and closeouts on December 13th from 10 to 2. Check out the CASH website. This is great information for folks that want to set themselves up for success from the beginning of their project to make sure that the audit on the back end goes smoothly. So it's going to be a great web shop on the 13th. Make sure to put that on your calendar, and the full description on the CASH website. So I think that if we move to the next slide, that takes us into our first presentation. We're happy to have Eric Drever from DSA with us. Lots of happenings at DSA, and always good to have Eric or one of the DSA team with us. So good morning, Eric. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Jeff. I am a first-time attendee at this monthly meeting, though.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. So yeah, there absolutely is a lot going on at DSA. I do have a presentation to share. So if you'll give me about 10 seconds to position the appropriate screens, I can share my screen and get that going. And I apologize. It's sometimes a juggle to get things on the right screen so you can present. Screen share. That's this one. So let me know if you're seeing the presentation.
Yeah, it looks good, Eric. I think we got it.
Okay, perfect. So thank you again for the invite to the monthly meeting. This is our 1207 update. And as you all know, we are open. We are available for meeting in the office Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and most staff are available for telework on Mondays and Fridays. So I hope you're taking advantage of that. We definitely are excited to be back in the office and seeing everybody in person again. As you know, the California Building Code triennial cycle is due to be effective January 1 of 2023. So we're getting pretty close to that rolling out. It was published back in July. As typical, the administrative code becomes effective shortly after approximately a month or so after the adoption date. And so the administrative code part 1 has been effective since March of 2022. I'm going to go through these slides pretty quickly so that I don't delay everybody more than necessary. I've got about 20 or so slides to make my way through. As typical, I believe we usually will let you know what's going on in terms of workload at DSA. So you can see our workload in our current month, or as of last month, was approximately $1.3 million worth of project reviews And of that, at the time, Los Angeles was the busiest, or the largest share of that, at 30.7% of our workload was going through the Los Angeles office. Fast forward to our projected totals for this month, or excuse me, for December, and you can see that we're at $2.6 million projected for this month. A big spike, and that's typical of a code adoption month or leading up to a code change. So it was anticipated. We have contracts in place for all reviews. We are utilizing both overtime and our contracts to meet that demand. But as you may be aware, we did send out a notification later in the month, last month, letting folks know that they should expect a 2 to 4 week delay in the review period as we work our way both through the additional workload that we're seeing, but also through that contract phase to get the consultants going. So it ends up extending the normal duration of reviews a little bit longer, but we're doing everything within our power to not delay projects and to meet the demand. As everybody may know, AB 306, which was chaptered in July, requires that employee and faculty housing projects reviewed by the local jurisdiction, but you should know that those projects are public housing and housing at a place of education for faculty, or if it's for employees, it's just public housing under the CBC, including single family units. DSA may still provide oversight if it's on a campus due to accessibility and fire life safety requirements. Please make sure that your designers, which may or may not be as familiar with the DSA process, reference the DSA Guide to Public Housing. This has a wealth of information in there that would be a benefit to them to familiarize and become familiar with DSA requirements for public housing and housing at a place of public education. SB 169 also is creating a bit of work for DSA. Again, this is both public housing and housing at a place of public education. Access will be reviewed by DSA. If it's a dorm on campus or district-owned property, full submittal to DSA will be required. Because of all of this, we really recommend we're open. There's some new legislation that's increasing our workload. We really encourage everybody to streamline the process to meet with us early. And that includes not just designers, but our school districts and school representatives as well. We're happy to meet with everybody to clarify the process. Depending on the region that you're submitting under, you should meet with that particular office, and you would use either DSA 91, 92, and 93 or 94 to request a pre-application meeting. And in those meetings, you can determine if DSA submission is required. You can determine if the project is exempt for certain small projects. You'll be able to discuss schedule it. It helps us react a bit better when we know what the workload is. And you'll be able to plan your project schedule a little bit based upon some DSA durations. We'll discuss any particular code interpretations you might have at the time or that might come up during that pre-application meeting to avoid delays later in the review process. And then happy to always discuss new code requirements. I will go over some of those in later slides. Some of the DSA collaboratives and work groups for our regulatory development have been occurring during our pre-cycle. I will let you know that on December 2nd and 1st, DSA submitted to the Building Standards Commission all of our code packages, including the admin, Part 2, Part 5, and Part 11 changes. So some of the collaboratives that we've been going over, or that I will mention, is the Public School Construction Collaborative, which we just met last week. And I'll be honest, I noticed that on this slide and I went, wait, that was a little while ago. And it seems like time is just flying by, but it was just last week that we met with our Public School Construction Collaborative. It was a really good meeting. We went over energy storage systems, fire life safety requirements. We went over the existing buildings task force and some of the expected amendments to the CBC for the intervening code cycle. Jeff, I know you mentioned that was a hot topic in most meetings that you see. I'll go over some of those changes in a few slides. Again, just to reiterate, we submitted late last week on the for the code advisory committees with the Building Standards Commission, their packages last week. Relating to the existing building task force, it's another collaborative or task force that we have going on. We do have a costimator on board. We've been meeting with them regularly and are really excited to see a lot of the default values that and the sort of criteria that are being developed come out of that. We're actually getting pretty close to that. The task force is also discussing revisions to IREB 3 to permit the waiver of EDCR and materials testing if certain conditions are met for single-story wood frame buildings. I know that's a big topic for that group, to identify those very typical wood frame buildings that are pretty common on K through 12 campuses and some community colleges. They'll be developing a white paper and exploring alternatives to the 50% rule based upon tiered approach, trigger approach, and work area method. If you have questions on any of this, I would really strongly encourage you to contact Brian Frank at our office, who works with Diane closely. And that's Brian with a Y, so it's bryan.frank@dgs.ca.gov, and he would be happy to answer any of your questions on that task force. The Cal Green Carbon Reduction Collaborative really is targeting that intervening code cycle for the 2022 CBC, which will become effective in July of 2025. But we, as I mentioned, have submitted the Part 11 proposals to Building Standards Commission for the CACs, and the carbon reduction proposal was included in that. So this collaborative really was the primary vehicle for which we used to do our public outreach, partner with industry stakeholders. Also involved in that heavily was New Buildings Institute, the Rocky Mountain Institute, USGBC, and AIA California. And again, it does aim to do some incremental increases in carbon reduction. So it's actually decreasing carbon. As I mentioned, the proposal was submitted, and you can see in front of you some of the sort of high level requirements, and we really are targeting larger structures or aggregate of structures. So it would be a new campus might need to comply with these new requirements again in July of 2025, but it's 50,000 square feet of building area or greater, and that's the aggregate, or if it's a single building, and then or additions where the aggregate area is twice the existing building, shall choose option 2 or 3. As you see below, you can comply with option 1, which is building reuse, and that's where you are maintaining 45% of the combined primary structural elements. The other is more of a performance. Option 2 is more of a performance-based process, where it's the whole building life cycle assessments, and that's based upon longstanding ISO 14044. Most designers and design teams are pretty familiar with this process. Is based upon the same criteria that you might find in LEED, and LEED's been around for quite a while. The software, and there is free software available, but the software would develop the report to demonstrate compliance. So that's more of a performance based. And then lastly, the prescriptive approach, which really pulled from Buy Clean California and use those limits, or 175% of those limits, to create the baseline prescriptive approach for certain materials, meaning steel, rebar, flat glass, and insulation. This proposal does add to it concrete. I think we've had some good collaboration with those industries and are looking forward to entering into the public process through the code advisory committees. And that was, it is being co-adopted by DSA and BSC.
Hey, Eric, we had a question pop into chat.
Sure.
On essentially decarbonization, question regarding the timing of phasing out of natural gas on campuses. I know DSA has done some work around, kitchens of the future and that type of thing. I don't know if you had any comment on the natural gas and the timing of that.
So that's a common, so regarding to the carbon reduction building or CalGreen code amendments, that is embodied carbon. It's all based upon embodied carbon, not operational carbon. The operational side, the phasing out of natural gas, really is handled by the Energy Commission. It'd probably be folly for me to comment too much on that. I know, obviously, as everybody does, anecdotally, that absolutely is a goal of theirs. The timing of it, I couldn't speak to really, though. I hope that answers the question, or realize it doesn't fully answer the question, but I'm unable to fully answer the question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Eric.
Okay, thank you. Again, moving fairly quickly through these, and I apologize for the pace. EV charging is part of that intervening cycle, code cycle proposals. I should say, though, that the current January 1, 2022 CalGreen does include non-residential changes to the non-residential requirements. Those are co-adopted by BSC and DSA, and for the first time in January, charging will be required. And so you certainly can look forward to those requirements, but as it relates to the proposed changes to that, much of the feedback we received really highlighted the need for DSA to consider separate charging requirements moving forward. And so the proposed changes in the intervening code cycle will be to break out the requirements for schools and include an expansion of the ability for schools to use low-level charging, meaning level 1, level 2, or level 2 as an alternative. We built into the proposal an alternative, a power alternative, whereby instead of requiring campuses to provide a specific number of spaces, that they are to provide a certain level of power. Obviously, the underlying calculation is based upon the original assumption of power per space, but it allows for some flexibility for schools to best decide how their campus can respond to those requirements. There also is some provisions for alterations. Now, it's not the alterations that you've come to expect out of the accessibility. They're more related to specific types of parking alterations, whereby you end up getting into the ground. For example, if you're adding solar panels to a parking area, that would trigger. That's a type of alteration. If you are removing the parking, and not just for resurfacing, but to remove the parking, and you're getting into the earth in the subgrade, that's when it would be triggered. Also, if you're doing that and there are existing EV capable spaces, meaning the infrastructure is there, if you're doing alterations, then you would be required to bring a charger to that space, which really is the original intent of that EV capable space anyways, when it was originally written into the code. So we're merely progressing in that long-term plan. There are, of course, changes to the plumbing code, Part 5, which we are co-adopting with building standards that allow for all gender multi-user restrooms. This is really strongly supported by CDE, has strong support and the legislative support for local jurisdictions to require, should they choose to all gender multi-user restrooms. And so these currently in the plumbing code, there is a prohibition and separate sexes are required. This really is an exception to that requirement and provides certain design elements that need to be included if an all gender multi-user restroom is designed. So it no longer makes it a prohibition. It allows for that design to happen. And that, of course, gets extended to schools since DSA and BSC are co-adopting. And then there are some related accessibility requirements relating to urinal compartments, which did not exist in Chapter 11B. Some of the privacy concerns over a urinal and the placement of a urinal, obviously those would end up needing to go into a compartment, which for the plumbing code has been termed and defined as a privacy compartment. And so we needed to make sure that we included some requirements for those urinal compartments.
Eric, we had a couple of quick questions just on
Yeah.
calculating fixture counts.
Sure.
Under that code option for all genders. Can you maybe just touch briefly on, if we had a count requirement for boys and girls, how that translates to all gender?
Yeah, there are requirements in that proposal. I would, while we're expanding on that, I really encourage everybody to be involved in the Code Advisory Committee meetings so that we can gain that input. One of my goals is to expand and really take advantage of the virtual world that we're, our public meetings are happening in, and try to gain more public involvement in this process. So I encourage you to do that when the Code Advisory meetings happen. To answer the question specifically, it's a combined calculation. So you would take the total required for men's, total required for women's, and if you're providing an all gender facility or multi-user facility, you would add those two things together. It does allow, and I know we have comments on it, it does allow for the replacement of a water closet for a required urinal in those instances. Doesn't demand it. You can treat the urinal separately should you choose to do so. I think there are some concerns over water usage when it comes to the replacement of a water closet for a urinal. You've always been allowed to replace in a separate men's facility. You could replace urinals for water closets, place a urinal in lieu of a water closet, but you could never do the inverse of that. And so there are, in a multi-user all gender facility, there is the provision of the allowance for that replacement should you choose to do so. So it's a combined calculation. Okay, so I know I'm probably going long, and I apologize. I'll try to get through these pretty quickly. So again, encourage you to take part in any of our code development. You can find the web pages for each of the code developments on our main web page. Please make sure you take note of the other web pages that are available, whether it's getting to zero over time. These are we're really looking to expand our public outreach, and this is some of those efforts that you see in front of you. So the California Sustainable Schools Showcase is one where we're trying to highlight really exemplary projects throughout California, whether it's K through 12 or community colleges. We're doing that quarterly. That update should be coming out in the next week or so. We have our net zero and zero net energy carbon resources, the 7x7, water conservation, mechanical acceptance testing. So all of that information is available on our web pages. So please do peruse the web and look for updates and get on our listserv as well. So DSA Academy, you can see the list of resources there available there. We have the California EVCS accessibility, which really was just updated for the 2022 CBC, and the all electric California schools, which was previously mentioned. And we absolutely have a number of classes that are in the works to add to the DSA Academy, both for continuing education for professionals, as well as just having some good resources available through our academy. I mentioned the the Schools Sustainability Showcase. This is a quick slide on the current one. This will be updated. Our previous one was the Yosemite Community College. Los Altos School District is our current one. Block Intermediate School. So you can look to our webpage for that. Subscribe to our listserv. Always look forward to reaching out to all of our constituencies, especially our schools. So that concludes the presentation. I apologize if I went long.
No apology necessary, Eric. There is certainly a lot going on in the DSA arena right now, so it's time well spent. We did see a last question come in, and it's around the idea of flexibility around the EV charging stations and school district size, and I'll give you an opportunity to respond. But one of the things I've appreciated about DSA recently is looking for options for districts. We saw that with the EV4 and EV3 process of how do we provide options within the code that we're working within, and same thing around the vehicle charging option based on number of power versus strictly the number of spaces. So I appreciate DSA's efforts in that regard. And so the specific question was around funding, which Michael Watanabe, our next presenter, might want to comment on a bit, but whether or not there's any other type of flexibility for school districts around EV charging based on school district size or project size.
Well, let's see. So specifically for school district size and school size, no, there aren't any, there isn't any allowance for those types. It would be based upon size of project. So, certainly smaller projects would not require as much charging. Smaller alterations, if you're adding smaller areas, wouldn't require charging. There are some allowances for parking areas that don't have power. So there's an exemption there to try to minimize the requirements if you're making an alteration to a parking area that simply doesn't have power. But if you do have, say, power out there for, say, lighting or other things, it would not qualify for that. I think maybe some more rural districts might fall into the prior category where they don't always provide power to those parking areas, but specifically to size of district or campus, no.
All right, very good. I appreciate you being here with us, Eric. Always good to have you. You're welcome anytime. Great update with lots of information. So thanks again. And I did see the question come in on net energy metering 3.0. Let's hold that one until we get to the School Energy Coalition update. I think that might be a great place to have a conversation around that. So thanks again, Eric. And let me bring up Michael Watanabe from the Office of Public School Construction to give us an update. Thanks again for being with us, Michael. And let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. A few updates and reminders. We've had gave out over $1 billion in cash over the last 2 months of state allocation board meetings, which means we have a lot of due dates coming up for fund meeting your fund release requirements. Those projects that are approved at the October board. Don't forget your fund release authorizations are due January 24th, 2023 to OPSC. For those that got priority funding apportionments at the November meeting, that your 5005s are due February 26, 2023. That is a Sunday, so if you are working on the weekend, those should come through OPSC online to make sure you meet that deadline. And also at the November meeting, with the approval from OEL on the direct apportionment regulations to modify those time fund release deadlines, we did approve 40 projects for $212 million. So just a reminder, those 5005s were projects that did not receive financial hardship funding. Your 5005s, you have 180 days to get those in. And if you did submit for financial hardship funding, then you do get 365 days to turn in those fund release requests. We are doing a lot of reminders for school districts that have, we know some of the projects we're working on now go back to 2018, 2019 receive dates for OPSC. So if you haven't started your project yet, just a reminder that you need to start the construction on your project before your DSA plans expire. If you do need to refresh your DSA plans, you need to do that before we take your project to the board for apportionment. We are keeping date order received. We're continuing to process. So look ahead on a workload list. If we're approaching your project, and if you have a project that may have plans that'll expire soon, you really should work on refreshing those plans or starting construction, either or, so that you don't miss those deadlines, because the ramifications is we can't process your project to the board with everybody else in your receive date and we send it back. You would then have to resubmit with refreshed plans to get back to the end of the line. So we're trying to send lots of reminders of school districts of those deadlines that are coming up. Announcement went out yesterday via email blast. We are doing a webinar on January 18th. From 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. You can register via Eventbrite or just show up on the link to our webinar. That'll be on the full day kindergarten program. Tips for using OPSC online, tips for submitting your applications. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions. We'll also have a presentation on the financial hardship aspect of the facilities program for FTK. Top tips too, to make sure you get your preference points that you qualify for that. With financial hardship, OPSC Online does accept the phase 1, phase 2 checklists via OPSC Online now. Effective December 1st, OPSC staff are going to be actively using OPSC Online for those checklist submittals now and processing your apps. So there's new dashboards available for that. They'll walk through that on the webinar. If you aren't available for that webinar, we will record it. It will be on our YouTube page and website too, following the presentation. And we will be at Cash doing the same workshop again as well to repeat it. Another reminder, now that the board has taken action to change the regs for allowing all school districts to retain savings, that does mean all school districts now have to report annually the expenditure of savings until it's all spent, both the state and district shares. So remember, that is an annual reporting requirement until it's all gone. And savings is subject to local audits as well for anyone with funds released after July of 2017. OPSC wants to remind everybody that throughout the holiday season, as we go through the holiday breaks, a lot of people or school districts are closed. OPSC will continue to be opening and processing applications. We don't do COVID extension requests anymore. However, if you have people out of the office, you need a few days to respond to our 15 4-day letters. Just work with the auditors and the PMs directly. They can work with their supervisors to make sure we can meet our timelines still, but you can work with them directly. So you don't need to do the online form for that extension request. We've been talking about Fit a lot, the facility inspection tool. We did push out a new version to our website yesterday. We found out some of the programming in there was not compatible with Macintosh computers. We did fix that. So we would encourage you to always make sure you're using the form online to make sure you're downloading the newest version as we continue to work out little bug tweaks for all that automation we programmed into it. So it is available. We are on track for a web-based version where you can walk around with your tablets and laptops around campus, save that to an online SharePoint site, and then access it in the future to continue updating it. That we still will send an email blast, and we are on target for end of the year for that one. Let's see, 2 other items. We ran preliminary numbers. We're still waiting for the final end of the year results for making that CCI adjustment to our pupil grants in January SAB. Looking preliminary October numbers, it is looking like an over a 7% increase to our per pupil grants and our supplemental grants for this year. So we'll keep an eye, wait for the January data, and look forward to that in January. That does mean we won't take any new projects to the January board. They'll all go to February so that we won't have to adjust them again. And then lastly, we've been getting a lot of questions on the state budget. The 22-23 state budget proposed $2.1 billion for new construction modernization projects in 23-24. That still has to go through the legislative process. We have no heads up on what's going to happen with that, with the changes in the budget projections by the LAO. So we're watching it with all of you guys. We have no new information. We'll see what the governor proposes in January on retaining that general fund money for our program. So more to come on that one. And I think that's it I had. Going back to the net energy, zero net energy solar voltaics. Right now, there isn't additional funding under the SFP for those projects, but they are eligible expenditures if they're in the scope of the work of your DSA approved plans. But there is no additional funding. As those programs continue to develop and move through, we know things continue to move through the legislative process. They would need to work it into the SFP program under the Leroy Green Act as supplemental grants if there's any additional funding to be provided for the program. So that's just something to keep in mind. We get that asked that question a lot there, but they are eligible expenditures. You can put them on their expenditure reports. They're also eligible use of high priority capital outlay needs for use of savings as well if they weren't on your original set of plans. With that, I'll take any questions.
All right, I appreciate the update, Michael, and I'm taking a quick look at the chat to make sure we got everything. And it looks like we did with that photovoltaic and charging station question. So appreciate everything OPSC has done for us, for your cooperation and partnership with getting that fit form out and revised. I know that was, that's a workload on your office too. So appreciate your efforts there. I think that Excel tool is going to be valuable for folks out in the field. So appreciate you for that, and appreciate you for joining us on a constant basis here. So thanks again, Michael, for being with us. Let's continue to move through our agenda. Next, we have our legislative, regulatory, and maintenance network updates. We have Rebecca Curley, Nancy Chartes, and Ian Padilla, all CASH legislative advocates, and Nancy is going to go first. Welcome, Nancy. Thanks for being here.
It's good to be with you, Jeff. It's good to be with you all. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have so much great information. I'm going to try to zoom through my piece, no pun intended. So this Monday, the legislature gavelled in for its organizational session, for the start of the new legislative session, rather. So the 2022-23 session, excuse me, the 23-24, I guess, session is underway. So the new legislative session. We will have 32 new legislators joining us. 30 of them were sworn in on Monday. 2 of them, unfortunately, are stuck in a little bit of a cliffhanger, too close to call situation, but we do expect that those races will be called prior to the certification deadline coming up, in just about 1 or 2 more weeks. The Assembly also voted on its transition plan for leadership. For the time being, Speaker Anthony Rendon will continue. Midway through the year, they will change, and the new speaker starting July 1, 2023 will be Robert Rivas, as was expected. This vote really just formalized the caucus vote that had been announced previously. So they spend the first half of the year just working on that transition plan, and it helps us in our advocacy efforts as well. We, as we always do after a big election year, are initiating our member education, and by that we mean our new legislator education process. And anyone who is new to staffing school facilities, we invite them for an overview of school facilities and start preparing them for the advocacy issues that we're going to have to address very shortly. There were already 145 bills introduced in the legislature this week, so that process has also started reviewing legislation. You may hear that there was a bond bill introduced, and there was. It's not ours. Mr. Glazer has reintroduced the same bond bill that he introduced in the last session, which would include UC in the K-12 bond. That's not our preferred method because we just don't think that's a formula for success. So Mr. Glazer is really, I think, introducing this bill as a way to say, hey, I'm still interested in being a part of this conversation. Cash is beginning its conversations about the 2024 bond. We will in all likelihood continue our dual-pronged approach where we are pursuing a 2024 bond and at the same time advocating for general fund support, particularly in light of the fact that we need to remain flexible as we were last year to the budget realities. There could be, for example, a bond bill that moves along and then the state's financial situation improves and the administration would prefer to spend one-time money on facilities as opposed to a bond, things of that nature. So that's why we have to be ready for all eventualities. One thing we will be working to realize this coming year is that the legislature and the governor make good on the intent language where they said that they were going to commit some general fund money to support facilities, both the school facilities program and on the TK side, which Rebecca may or may not expand on a little bit. So I want to be brief because we have a lot of information to cover. So that's all from me, and I will toss it to my colleague, Rebecca.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning, everybody. Just a quick note on local bonds. We did have an election that Nancy just talked about at the state level. We know many of you went out for local bonds. Congratulations to those of you who did pass. Cash will be finalizing a list of election results after that election is certified. So counties have to finalize their election results December 8th. That's tomorrow. And then the state certifies the election December 16th. So look for that in your member resources on the Cash website. We will be posting that sometime later this month. And then connecting and bridging to what Nancy was talking about, kind of setting up this conversation for our budget negotiations for 23-24. The framework for those discussions is starting to emerge. And the Legislative Analyst's Office, who works for the legislature, recently came out with their number on what they think the budget deficit is going to be going into the next fiscal year. They're pinning it at about $24 billion, but that number does not assume a recession. They work for the legislature. They don't want the legislature to make cuts to programs prematurely. So they're saying if there's a recession, that number could get worse, but don't plan your budget at this point so early to the worst case scenario. The governor is finalizing his numbers for his January 10th budget proposal. So that really kicks off the formal conversations. Expect the governor to be a bit more conservative than the Legislative Analyst's Office. And those two entities negotiating over the next few months on what the real picture is for expected revenues going into 23-24. And by the way, that picture really solidifies at the May revision when we are able to look at the April tax receipts and get a better idea of what that fiscal picture will be. Under LAO's report, there's some really interesting news for schools, though, which is Proposition 98 minimum guarantee funding is looking pretty good. They're expecting about a $2 billion decrease based on the constitutional formula going into 23-24. But compare that to the gains that education has made over the last few years since 2019, when the minimum guarantee was increased by over $30 billion. So LAO is saying, you know, we don't like to see a decrease there, but at least in relative terms, it's a very minor setback given all of the gains that have been made on the education side of the budget. The reason that this matters for the work that we are all doing and the work that you are all doing is because as part of this budget framework, if Proposition 98 and schools are looking pretty good, then cuts that need to be made based on any anticipated deficit happen on the non-Prop 98 side of the budget. So that's outside of the protected education operational budget. And our general fund commitment for school facilities that Nancy spoke about, which is about $2 billion in 23-24, and then another $875 million in 24-25. That really hangs in the balance, depending on what happens with the economic picture and whether or not the legislature, governor, and state are able to make good on those promises. We have that little wrinkle of the GAN limit, right? So some of that, most of that, all of that may be needed to maintain those GAN limit solutions, and the state may be looking elsewhere for cuts. But the LAO is saying, look, legislature, you do need to be prepared that for commitments that were made in prior budgets, you may need to claw those back, roll those back, and use those funds if they've not yet been encumbered to help maintain service levels in your existing programs. A quick note, one good thing that education did through the last few years is one-time money was typically spent for one-time purposes, at least at the state budgeting level. And so that is helping to contribute to the generally positive picture for schools going into this sort of uncertain time. And we're going to be watching that very closely as cash advocates. We are going to be fighting for that money and saying schools deserve and need the funds that have been promised to them so that we can ensure that we've got the facilities needed to do things like house our new transitional kindergarten grade level and to do the repairs, the modernizations, the upgrades that are needed for our educational purposes. On transitional kindergarten, just to pivot a little bit, we're really appreciative of all the funds that have come out in that third round from the state allocation board. So those final apportionments in that third round were made at the November state allocation board meeting. So that's about $225 million for those projects. And we're now looking forward to next year. There is a round opening up February 1st. Applications are due March 2nd, and there's about $350 million available. That includes $100 million that was dedicated in the 2022 budget. Hope that that's maintained and are feeling positive about that, but excited to see that next round. And for those of you who have been wondering if your project may or may not be competitive, they did fund down pretty far on the list in this last round, getting down to projects that had 27 out of 80 priority points. So continues to submit those projects. That message that we sent out at the Cash Fall conference, absolutely continue to do that. And as Nancy mentioned, bill introductions are taking place. We're going to be watching to see what comes out over the course of the next few months, working towards a deadline at the end of February when we see what all these new legislative proposals are. Operating in an environment where almost 30% of our legislators are brand new and folks don't even know where the bathroom is going to set up a really interesting dynamic as we go into bill introductions. There's going to be a lot of history repeating, folks who think they've got really cool, new, unique ideas, and we have to work with them to educate them and say, well, your predecessor tried this, here's where cash is, here is how that would really affect schools and folks at the local level. So with that, I will hand the talking stick over to my colleague, Ian. Thank you, everyone. And I'll peek at the chat and see if there's anything I need to respond to after Ian.
Thank you, Rebecca and Nancy. I appreciate that. Of course, as I usually do, I'm going to give a presentation, a little update on maintenance issues under the Cash Maintenance Network banner. Speaking of legislation and old ideas that some folks think might be new, we have had Assemblyman contact us and who is planning to run a school locks bill. So we are going to meet with them and let them know about some of the history and some of the the impacts on school facilities and maintenance. And so that should be interesting, but we expect that school safety and bills like this, school locks, will be, for some obvious reasons, a popular subject next year in the legislature. So, of course, this is in our effort to meet with folks early before bills are introduced and try to make changes on behalf of schools that we think will help them. You know, less complicated programs, make sure we don't overlap existing requirements, and certainly funding impacts. And those are kind of our guide as we look at these bills that are introduced. So watch that space. That'll be a significant one, not only for maintenance and operations, but for school facilities in general. The other piece is I have an update on the CalShape program. I think some folks know that it was a 3-round program, $600 million over 3 years. All 3 rounds are done now. And there is $300 to $350 million that were unused in the program. And we think it's definitely related to some of the difficulties with getting qualified projects through the program, some of the limitations and so on. So the good news is that a 4th round will be opened in mid-December. We don't have all the details. The CEC will be releasing that soon, but we have it on good authority that in mid-December, they will open the 4th round and be open for applications again. There's a lot of pressure on them to get the funding out for some obvious reasons. And so they want to work with Cash and others to try to make sure schools know that it's available. I'll be working with them to make sure they're at the Cash annual conference and other places where we can get more information about that. And there'll certainly be more detail at that time. So that's some good news. I was concerned as an advocate that funding might get swept or something else. And so we're glad, even with some of the limitations, that it will be staying school money used for HVAC and plumbing purposes upgrades. So there's that. I also wanted to thank OPSC and Michael Watanabe and his staff in particular for working with us again on the updated FIT form. It is available in Excel form now, but there's been some other issues. I think that's coming from the field. Folks are letting OPSC know how it's working and not. So basically in the process of being perfected. And again, want to thank OPSC for working with us on that. I would say finally, I wanted to highlight that the Cash Maintenance Network last Thursday put on a joint workshop with the School Energy Coalition. And the focus of that was on state climate goals and a lot of the things we're talking about. Mr. Drever from DSA this morning, a lot of those issues, EV charging, solar and storage. We've talked about CO2s and so on, really focused on that. With a particular eye towards how it would affect school energy managers as well as school maintenance. So it started off with our DSA outlining a lot of their efforts in these areas, and then a variety of presentations on the design implications, the implications for energy managers, and certainly school maintenance. We had a very good presentation by Roger Silveria, who from Fremont, USD, on CO2 monitors, definitely an expert. You've seen him before. So that's to say that we're continuing to have this conversation, both getting the information out to you, but also in some ways it was a conversation between the state agency, and they're hearing directly from the districts and experts in these forums that we put on. So we're going to continue to do that next year and drill down even more as there's more information available, and get that information out to folks who are interested. So with that, I will turn it over, and unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
All right, appreciate that, Ian, and thanks also to Nancy and Rebecca. And I'm taking a quick look at the chat as well, just to make sure that we covered everything. And I, on my laptop, it's tiny today. That's a long comment. I'm going to let Rebecca read that one while we keep moving forward and come back to it if we need to. But thanks for the efforts that you do on behalf of our membership, and always great to have experts like Nancy, Rebecca, and Ian working on our cause. We'll bring Nancy back up for a School Energy Coalition update. I know there was a question. I believe you have some comments about net energy metering. The net energy metering 3.0. So Nancy, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Jeff. So yes, the School Energy Coalition has been busy once again in its advocacy with the CPUC. I believe I covered this last week, so I won't go into great detail, but the latest iteration of the proposal before the PUC for the next tariff, the net energy metering 3.0 proposed decision, it improved some things. They took some things off the table, but it on balance is still unfortunately pretty bad for schools. So they removed the solar tax, but there's still a grid access charge. For schools, it would decrease about 75% of the cost effectiveness. So you would lose that value because of the change in the rate at which you would be compensated for the excess energy that you produce and sell back to the grid. So that's obviously a very significant hit to our economic feasibility for projects that we will be mandated to incorporate into new construction, and we anticipate later on into existing construction. So we remain engaged on that along with a broad coalition of partners. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we are thinking globally about how to address that shortfall if in fact the decision as proposed is adopted. Obviously, we in the education sector want to be part of helping the state meet its climate goals and its carbon goals, but this will be a major impediment. Without NEM 2.0 or NEM 1.0, for those of you grandfathered into it, we would be left with going to operational funds or some other source of funding to fund what is going to become a mandated part of our school facilities, and that's a tremendous hit. So our conversation will be wide ranging, and you will continue to hear about that. But in terms of timeline, the PUC is set to act on this as early as December 15th. So very shortly. They could postpone, they could delay, they could take it up then. We don't know. But stay tuned, please follow SEC emails, and we'll give you all the details and any updates on developments and of course opportunities to engage. We have been sending out communications to SEC members and Cash also as well regarding ways that you can contact the PUC, contact the governor. All of that matters. We just think this is very contradictory to the climate goals that we all want to support. So that's what I have for today, Jeff.
All right, thank you very much for that, Nancy. Yeah, energy. I think we're going to be talking a lot about energy in the upcoming time frame. All right, let's bring Ian back up to take a quick look at Californians for School Facilities and look at the federal picture. So Ian, welcome back.
Thank you, Jeff. I actually don't have anything brand new. I haven't touched bases with Dave on it. I will say this. We, Cash, others in our office are focusing very much on the Inflation Reduction Act. That's a very significant, I think there's all kinds of pieces in there. So we're drilling down in that and seeing is what basically is available for school facilities, maintenance, and so on. It's almost 1,000-page bill, but it's worth wrangling with because there's a lot of pieces in there. And so we're basically trying to deconstruct that and make sure we get that piece out to our members. But as always, CSF is definitely, keeping us up to date. And especially we have our advocate over there. So we try to stay on it as much as possible. So more in the future, and it should be an interesting one next year.
All right, appreciate that, Ian. Yeah, there certainly is a lot in that bill to work through. I'm sure we'll start to see the ramifications of that start to dribble our way very shortly.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, thanks again, Ian. And so next up, we've got an annual conference coming up. Let's bring up our annual conference planning chair, our vice chair, Alan Rising. Alan, you want to give us an update on the conference?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. So we're just a few short months away from the 44th annual conference to be held again at the Sacramento Safe Credit Union right here in downtown Sacramento. The dates are February the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. All of our workshops have been set. Information about the conference, including registration if you haven't registered yet, as well as the conference brochure, is available on our Cash website. So we're looking forward to seeing everyone there at our marquee event in February. A little housekeeping, the trade show floor is now officially sold out. But there's still opportunities for some of our partner firms out there that work closely with our industry. There's sponsorship opportunities available. So all of that information is, again, on our Cash website. You can look for the annual conference link and find a host of information there about getting involved and being involved. There's plenty of sponsorship opportunities available to become a part of this great conference. Lastly, hotel accommodations have been briskly selling out. Most of our initial block of hotel rooms are currently sold out. Our cash staff are working with local hotels right around the convention center to open up additional blocks of rooms. Those are, again, listed on our cash website. So if you don't have a room and haven't registered, first of all, shame on you. But secondly, jump on that right away. They are selling out quickly. You want to be able to secure that room right here in Sacramento for this great event. As those rooms sell out, we will continue to work with hotels to open up more blocks of rooms as we move forward. So we are on an upward trajectory. It looks like our attendance is going to surpass prior years. We're really happy about the number of registrants so far, and we're looking for a great conference, returning to normal, as it were, as we get back to work and doing the things that we do in our industry. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff, but it's going to be a great event. We're looking forward to seeing everybody there.
All right. Thanks very much, Alan. I'll reiterate that it is looking like it's going to be a great event. Should be a good time for all. Lots of great professional development and networking opportunities there. So again, thanks for the work, and thanks to the committee for all the hard work they put in as well. And speaking of networking opportunities, if you do have an upcoming RFP, RFQ, job opening at your district or firm, I encourage you to utilize the CASH website and list that. And you see on your screen on this slide some of the current openings that we've had or positions recently. Do take advantage of that. It's a great way to reach a much broader audience than you might be able to reach just locally. And in this digital world, how we find our information is changing. So here's a great option for you to reach out to the CASH membership. Again, you can check that out on the CASH website to post those opportunities there. And I saw the question come in from David. Did we say the trade show floor was sold out? It is. And staff is looking at options for other opportunities there. So reach out to CASH staff if you have any further questions on that. And I'm going to take one last look and wrap us up here. We came home just a few minutes early, but lots of great information. Again, thanks to all of our presenters today. And our next CASH Day will be held in January. We don't have the exact date yet, but we will definitely blast that out to our membership in an email as soon as we have that time officially calendared. So again, thank you everybody that took the time out of your day to join us. Appreciate you very much. And we're moving into the holiday season. So hope everybody has a blessed holiday time and good time with family and friends. And we will see everybody in January. Take care, everyone.
Have a great holiday, everyone.